whoever won contenders for best picture finder. Did I get you a name? We're gonna have to.
Okay, so I'm Gino, and we have Stephanie, Kim, and Andre, and we're going to be talking about interviewing, like different types of interviews, and different situations of what you can and cannot do in different types of interviews. Okay, so the most common interview is the one-on-one interview. It's where it's only the interviewer and the interviewee are present. The format of the interview is conversational, with the interviewer pretty much driving the agenda in the beginning, and then the candidate asking questions toward the end. Then we have panel interviews, which are when there are several people used to interview one candidate at the same time. They're normally for executive positions or positions of high status. The whole idea of the panel interview is to put the candidate under more pressure than a typical interview. Since there's more people interviewing the candidate, it means that the one chosen is probably the correct one. Then we have serial interviews where a candidate will meet with several people throughout the day, usually back to back. The candidate is interviewed by one person, and it gets passed on to the next, and the next, and so on. These types of interviews are physically and mentally tiring because they often take the entire day. The longer a candidate stays, though, the better chances of him getting the job are. Then we have lunch interviews. It's where the interviewer takes the interview out for lunch or dinner. These types of interviews are usually unstructured. They are intended to mainly evaluate the social skills and the manners of the candidate, and it gives the interviewer a better chance at learning their personality. Then we have group interviews where they're the opposite of panel interviews. It's several interviewers and one candidate, and the interviewer will interview several candidates at the same time. The interviewer will ask questions to no one in particular in hopes that someone will emerge. I have actually been in this situation, so I'll talk about it in my new and used slides. Then we have screening interviews, which is the type of job, interview that's conducted to determine if the applicant has the qualifications needed for the job. A screening interview is typically the first interview in the hiring process. It can be done either in person or over the phone. In both cases, the results of the screening interview will determine if the candidate moves to the next round. You can expect functional questions in a screening interview. The interviewers at this stage are usually recruiting or hiring managers, not the manager for the exact position. Their goal is to create a short list of appropriate candidates who will then continue on to the next interview. We have non-directive interviews, which are used to bring out the respondents' attitudes and feelings. The interviewer strives to allow respondents themselves to set the terms of the discussion. Non-directive interviews occur most often when the line manager, who doesn't do professional interviewing, is the one who's conducting it, and the questions tend to be broad in general, so the candidate can elaborate and tell stories about themselves. Then an structured interview is used to ensure each interview is presented with the same questions in the same order. This ensures that the answers can be compared with confidence between sample subgroups or between survey periods. Interviewers read the questions exactly as they're written on the questionnaire. A structured interview also standardizes the order in which questions are asked of the survey respondents so that the questions are always answered with the same context. It's important for minimizing the impact of context effects where the answers given to the survey question can depend on the nature of preceding questions. Though context effects can never be avoided, it's desirable to hold them a constant across all respondents. Situational interviews are where the interviewer presents the candidate with a hypothetical situation instead of asking them how to handle past experiences. This is because they want to see how you really think, not just how well you memorized answers and spit them back at every interview. The purpose of giving a hypothetical situation is to see how you act in the moment. Then in behavioral-based interviewing, it's used to discover how the interviewee acted in the specific employment-related situation. The logic is how you behaved in the past will then predict how you'll behave in the future. Instead of asking how you will behave, they ask how you did behave. The evaluative interview style relies on the scoring system to determine the right candidate for the job based on the candidate's knowledge, skill, attitude, and experience. It examines and rates the candidate's behavior in conflict situations. The interview technique eliminates the interviewer's personal bias. If you're the successful candidate, it means you really earned it. An example could be the company needs a well-organized project manager experienced in juggling multiple projects on a timeline and on a budget. The successful candidate is the one who scores the highest in the responses to the company's position-related interview questions. And we have stress interviews, which are an offbeat way to see how candidates react to unusual circumstances under pressure. The room could be held at a high temperature, or the candidate could be made to sit in an uncomfortable chair or even stand to throw them off and ask off-the-wall kind of questions. Then I recently had an interview experience with Aflac, and it was in the form of a group interview. There was one interviewer at the front of the room, one who sat in the back, but he didn't do any talking at all, and then there were 4 of us candidates who sat at the table together. The interviewer spent most of the time just describing the company, what the job would entail, and he did ask us a few questions, but they were mostly to get us involved in the conversation. They were not specifically to learn about us, as you would imagine in an interview. This particular interview did go well for me, though. The interviewer used me as his example and referenced throughout most of the interview. I asked good questions when necessary that showed I was interested in thinking about the work, while the other candidates kind of sat there quietly, and when they did ask a question or comment throughout his presentation, they were kind of off topic, and he already covered the answers, so they kind of just dug themselves into a hole. Then another interview experience I've had was a phone interview for Wild West College Graduate Leadership Program, which is supposed to get you general manager ready in 18 months of training. In the interview I had to give an example of a situation. I had to deal with an argument or fight between 2 employees, and I had to describe how I would handle a situation where an employee did something wrong, and I had to confront them about it. Okay, then another interviewing experience I have is at my family's restaurant business. There is no real interview process. It's just a small business, so when they come in, we ask them some quick informal questions as they're filling out an application. We ask them if they're old enough to serve alcohol, what their previous work experience was, and what position they're looking for. Okay, that's it for me, and next up is going to be Kim.
Screening interview. Screening interview, you may also know as the first cut job interview. The job of screening interview is without all application except the best qualified. And a screening interview is typically the first interview in hiring process, and it can be conducted over the phone, video, or in person. And the goal of screening interview is to create a short list of candidates who will continue to the next interview. Interviewer are looking for to see if you have an accessory skill for the positions based on questions during a screening interview, such as tell me about yourself, why are you interested in this job, or what are your salary requirements. A phone interview can be a screening step before an in-person interview. So keep in mind that different employers have a different method of screening candidates, so you should be prepared for all possibility. Prepare for a phone interview, just as you would for a regular in-person interview. And to prepare for the interview, compile a list of your strength or weakness, as well as list to answer to typical for an interview answer. In addition, have a list of questions ready to ask the interviewer. If you have advance notice of the interviews, make sure to review the job description and do a bit of research on the company. You should feel comfortable and ready to discuss your background and skill during the phone conversations. to practice for the interview, you need a friend or family member conduct a mock interview and record it so you can see how you sound over the phone. Once you have a recording, you will be able to hear your okay, and then you practice reducing them for your conversational speed. Listen to your recording will also help you pinpoint answer that you can improve. Before the interview, before the call, make sure you confirm all the detail, including the date, time, and who you will be talking to. Use a quiet, comfortable, or a private space so you can focus on the interview. Next is video interview. Currently, the use of video interview is very growing. It starts with the high technology company. Hiring managers have an opportunity to replay, review, or rate the interviews online. The manager can see each candidate answering the same questions and can compare the response. For the employer, video interview can save time and hiring expense because there are reduced travel costs and management time. The video interview process. The first is the company will select candidates for video interviews. Arrangement for an interview are scheduled at home or your own webcam, a company office or an offsite locations with your webcam setup, and a tutorial will provide instructions on the webcam and the interview. Usually there will be have 10 to 15 questions related on the jobs and the company is hiring for. The applicant will have 30 seconds to read the question and have 2 minutes to respond. Video interview tip. First, you need to dress up in professionals and then practice. You need make sure you record yourself and see how you appear on the camera, and be aware of your surrounding. Look at the camera, make an eye contact, and make sure the table is clean and neat. Because you don't want to distract the interviewer, and don't tap your pen or shuffle your papers. For you as a future manager, I understand that screening interview is also important as a process for hiring, and in screening interview can narrow down the applicants and will be easier for us to find out the right employee. So next is Stephanie. She will tell you more about her topics is how to conduct an interview.
Okay, so you can't find the right candidate you're looking for you can't find the right candidate if you don't know what you're looking for. So the first thing you should probably do is check your job description. Is it up to date? Is everything that's in the job description what you're looking for? Who previously worked in that position and why didn't it work out for them? So after you do your research, you need to Now do your research on the employees you're looking for. Read their resumes again. Their job history